there's always interference. Oh yeah, no more.
Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. So, as you can probably tell from what's up on the board, there's going to be a lot of examples today in class. Also, when I have a bunch of stuff written ahead of time on the board, you're more than welcome to take pictures of it. When I'm done, I'll leave it up here. So if you want to take pictures afterwards, you're more than welcome to. So today's class and also the activity and also lab 1 involves K-maps, which stands for Carnot maps. And K-maps are a method, a pictorial method of reducing Boolean equations. So on every table, it's like last class, there's a handout that has the logic gate along with all the different phase 2 identities and laws. Well, one way that you could reduce Boolean equations is use those laws and identities and basically brute force it. Okay, just like you can factor out and put together like terms in base 10 algebra, you can do the same sorts of things in base 2 algebra. But Carnot maps is like I mentioned, a pictorial way, and some people would say a funner way of doing reduction of Boolean equations. It's not like brute forcing it. It's actually using a method that's a lot of people, once they learn it, they kind of like it because it's sort of like a Crossword puzzle kind of thing. Now, out in industry, reduction of Boolean expressions is just done with an algorithm, a software program. So out in industry, you're not manually going to reduce expressions. You'll use a program to do it. But I feel, as well as most people that teach this class, that it's good for students to know at least one method of manually reducing these equations, because if nothing else, understanding manually how to do it will help you understand like the algorithm that does it. Okay. So that's going to be the focus today is Carnot maps, and again, we got a bunch of examples up here we'll go through in class, and then there's an activity for you to practice what you learned in class, and then there's a lab that has you apply. But before we start the Carnot maps, there's this one other thing that I want to cover that sort of ties into what we talked about last week when we were taking a truth table and then getting an SOP expression or a POS expression from that truth table. And it has to do with this here, that often people make this mistake. Okay? Not A ANDed with not B equal to AB, the whole thing not. See, these are not equal. Okay? But people often make this mistake. They think that these are equal. So that's where I want to start today, is just showing and emphasizing that these two expressions do not equate to each other, because this is a common error. Okay, so in symbols, this is what this expression is. See, not A ANDed with not B is the same thing as taking two inverters, right? Where one inverter inverts A and the other inverter inverts B. And then after these two are inverted, they get ANDed together. So your output would be not A, not B. See, that's not the same as AB ANDed, the whole thing knotted, because that's equal to an AND. Like this expression here is what we get for an AND gate, like we talked about last week. And remember, also what we talked about last week is that an AND gate is the same as an AND with the output inverted. Right, so to get this Boolean expression, first you AND A and B, then you not A and B. Okay, so you see how we get these expressions is much different, right? Because we're inverting and then ANDing, here we're ANDing and then inverting. But just to emphasize that they're not the same, we can do a truth table for both. right? We can do a truth table for this not A and with not B, and also a truth table for the NAND gate, and then compare the output of the truth table, right? Compare the two outputs. And if they're different, that means that those expressions are different. When you compare two truth tables and the outputs are the same, that means the two expressions are the same. Okay, so that's one way you can always verify whether expressions equate to each other, is do a truth table for both and see if the outputs match. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's start with not A, not B. Okay, the truth table here. Well, not A is just going to be the inverse of A. So we get a 1 there, 0, 0. Not B is just going to be the inverse of B. So this would be 1, 0, 1, 0. And then the output is going to be not A and not B ANDed together. So we would AND these together. So we talked about an AND gate last class. When do you get a 1 out of an AND gate? Yeah, when the inputs are all 1. Here we only have 2 inputs. So the only time we get a 1 out of an AND gate is when both inputs are 1. So we get a 1 here, and then these would be 0. You see, that would be the truth table for not A and with not A. So any questions on how to get this? All right, well, now let's go to the NAND gate. And again, a NAND gate's the same as an AND with an inverted output. So here, first we AND A and B. So we get a 0, 0, 0, and a 1. And then the output of that AND gets inverted, right? So we take the output AB of this AND gate and now invert it. So this would be 1, 1, 1, 0. And that's what we had last week for an AND, right? That you only get a 0 out of an AND gate when all inputs are 1. But now if you compare the output F of this truth table to the output F of this truth table, they're not the same. So therefore, these are not equivalent. Okay. In fact, from De Morgan's theorem, because remember last week we talked about De Morgan's, one of the laws that's on that handout. Do you remember from De Morgan's what a NAND gate is equal to? It's not equal to an AND gate with inverted inputs. It's equal to a what with inverted inputs? Or. Yeah, so you see a NAND gate is the same as an OR with inverted inputs, not an AND with inverted inputs. And then also, De Morgan's tells us what an AND gate with inverted inputs is equal to. It's equal to what kind of gate? An OR gate, exactly. Okay, so just by knowing De Morgan's, you know that's not true also. Okay, so you see the reason I bring this up is because, again, this is a common error. In fact, if I had a nickel for every time I saw this error on a test, you know, I'd be a very wealthy person. Okay? Remember last class, we were writing FOP equations, right, directly from the truth table. And for example, if we wrote this term here, we would write it as A, right, where the 1 is. And then we would put not B, right, where the 0 is. And then we put not C, where the 0 is. Right, and that would be the term for that input. Well, you know, whatever I see often is that somebody will write A, B, and C and it all knotted right from the truth table. And I think most of the time when this happens, it's just they're not being careful, right? That they're writing down and the bars just kind of, you know, merge together inadvertently. Okay, well, whether on purpose or whether inadvertent, this is incorrect. Okay, it should be A, not B, not C, not A, B, and C, and all not. Okay, so be careful, right? Because especially on a test, if you make an error like that, that is a deduction, even if it was inadvertent. Okay. All right. So, any question about anything I said here? Like I said, this has nothing to do with K-maps. It ties back to last class. Okay, well, let's talk about Carnot map. So in this class, we'll either have an 8-cell Carnot map, okay, this is an 8-cell, or a 16-cell Carnot map. And the first thing you probably notice when you look at these Carnot maps is that the numbering of the cell, okay, each square is called a cell. It doesn't go in order. So you see here how this top row, it goes 0, 1, 3, 2 instead of 0, 1, 2, 3. And this row goes 4, 5, 7, 6 instead of 4, 5, 6, 7. And then if you have a 16 cell Carnot map, the top two rows are just like the 8 cell, but then the third row starts with 12. It goes 13, 15, 14, and the last row goes 8, 9, 11, 10. Okay, well, there's a reason why the ordering is done like this. And the reason is that when the numbering is done like this, the Carnot maps have a property called adjacency. And adjacency here means that any cell that's to the side or below will only differ by 1 bit in binary. And that goes for both the 8 cell and the 16 cell. So any cell with this numbering, above, below, or to the side, will only differ by 1 bit. And you see, you need that property of adjacency for Carnot maps to work. Right? If Carnot maps don't have that property, then they're not going to work the way we want them to work in reduced expressions. Okay, so again, just as an example of what I'm talking about here, let's look at this cell 0. Okay, well, 0 in 3-bit binary is all zeros. And now if I compare 0 and 1, look, 0 and 1 in binary only differs by 1 bit. Also, if I compare 0 and 4, 0 and 4 only differ by 1 bit. I'll take cell 3, and I could take any, I'm just picking these randomly, but it doesn't matter. I can pick any cell. I'll pick cell 3. Okay, well, 3 and 1 only differ by 1 bit. 3 and 2 only differ by 1 bit. 3 and 7 only differ by 1 bit. Okay, and that's true. With this numbering, choose any cell, and if you look above and below and to the side, you're going to see that those numbers in binary only differ by 1 bit. Right? So that's the reason for the numbering not being in order. Okay, because by doing this numbering, we get this property of adjacency. Okay. Now the other thing you notice is, look, there's an A next to this row. There's a B for these 2 columns, and there's a C for these 2 columns. Okay, the reason you see an A here for this bottom row, which has 4, 5, 6, 7, is because if you look at the truth table, 4, 5, 6, 7, A is equal to 1. Likewise, this row is not A, right? Because if you look at 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, A is 0. Okay. These 2 columns, the reason why you see B is because if you look at 2, 3, 6, 7, right? See 2, 3, 6, 7, well, B is equal to 1 for those binary numbers. These columns here, these 2 columns are not B, right? Because if you look at 0, 1, 4, 5, let's see, 0, 1, 4, 5, well, B is equal to 0 for those binary numbers. Okay, C, 1, 3, 5, 7, 1, 3, 5, 7, C is equal to 1. Not C would be this column and this column, right? That's for 0, 2, 4, 6. 0, 2, 4, 6, C is equal to 0. Okay, and it's the same idea with the 16 cell. These 2 rows are A because for these binary numbers, A is 1. So for these 2 rows, it would be not A because for those binary numbers, A is 0. For these 2 rows, B is 1, so that's why you see a B here. For this row, B is 0, and for this row, B is 0, so that would be the not B row. For these 2 columns, C is equal to 1. So for these 2 columns, it would be not C, because C is equal to 0 for those binary numbers. For these 2 columns here, D is equal to 1, so that's why you see a D here. So this column would be not D, and this column would be. Right, so that's where the variables come from. Now, usually only one is shown, like either you'll show A, B, C, Or you'll show not A, not B, not C, right? Because if this is A, it's understood that's not A. You know, if this is not B, that's understood that that's B. Okay, so usually you'll see either the variables without the bar or you'll see the variables with the bar. Usually you don't see both. Okay. Now to fill out a Carnot map, okay, what goes inside the cells are the outputs for the corresponding input. So I'm just making up outputs here. You know, let's say this output was a 1, you know, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1. Well, we would put a 1 in the cell with the 0. Now we call these numbers for each cell in a Carnot map, we call them indexes. All right, so index 0, which is the output for input 0, that's what I put here. For cell 1, I would put the output for binary 1 from the truth table, so that would be a 0. Okay, and for cell 2, I put the output for binary 2 in the truth table, so that would be a 0. This would be a 1. This would be a 1. This would be a 1. This would be a 0. And this would be a 1. Okay, so each cell in the Carnot map shows the corresponding output for that input value, which is called its index. And it's the same thing for a 16 cell. You know, say we had something like this. I won't do the whole thing, but you know, say we had that. Well, you put a 0, right? For the 0 input, you put a 1, put a 1, put a 0, put a 1, right? And, you know, if there was more, if I listed more, you just do the same thing. Okay. So, any questions up to this point? Because we haven't really done anything with the Carnot map yet. We're just going over some of the basics. But now we're going to actually start using a Carnot map to do some reduction. Everybody ready? Okay. You're not ready? Okay, so let's start off. The goal. The goal of Carnot maps is to get the most reduced Boolean equation. And you're going to see the way we do that is we want to get the least number of largest groupings. And we're going to talk about what a grouping is. Okay. So our goal is get the most reduced Boolean expression, and the way you do that is by getting from the Carnot map the least number of largest groupings. Okay, you can group ones or you can group zeros. Okay, we'll talk about when you would want to do zeros. Now the groupings can only be square or rectangular. Okay, you can't have diagonal groupings and you can't have like irregular shape groupings. They either have to be squares or rectangles. Also, the groupings can only be groupings of 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. You can't have groupings of 3, groupings of 6. Okay, they've got to be powers of 2, whole number of powers of 2. Now, for an 8 cell, if you have a group of 1, that's going to give you a 3 variable term. Okay, it's going to give you a term that has 3 variables. If you have an 8 cell and you have a 2 grouping, that's going to give you a 2 variable term. A 4 grouping will give you a 1 variable term. And then if you have an 8 cell and you have either a grouping of 8 ones or a grouping of 8 zeros, that means your output either equals 1 or 0. Right? If your output equals the same value for all possible inputs, then your output is always that value. So you see, if you have a group of 8 and you're grouping ones, the output's just going to equal 1. And if you're grouping zeros, well, 8 zeros, it's just going to mean the output is always 0. And then, of course, you can't have a 16 grouping with an 8 cell map because you don't have enough cells. So this wouldn't apply. If you have a 16 cell and there's a group of 1, it's a 4 variable term. 2 grouping in a 16 cell will give you 3 variable term. 4 grouping gives you 2 variable term. 8 grouping, that's 4 things. An 8 grouping gives you 1 variable term. And then if you have 16 ones or 16 zeros, well, that means the output is either 1 or 0, depending on which one you're grouping. Okay, now you're going to see why this is so coming up, but this is just, something for us to reference to. Okay. All right, so let's do some examples. Now, I chose each of these examples for a reason. It's not like I haphazardly just chose a bunch for busy work. Each example brings up something, okay, something that's important to know, okay? And this first one is just a basic one we're starting, okay? So we're looking at this K-map, and we want to group 1. So when you group 1s, you get an expression for F. Okay, remember when you have a truth table, and you look at where the 1s are, right? You get an SOP for F. In a K-map, when you group 1s, you get an SOP for F. The difference is, with a truth table, you're getting a non-reduced equation. With a K-map, you're getting a reduced equation. Okay? So the way you approach this is, you always want to look for the largest grouping. So again, the goal is to get the least number of largest groupings. So with an 8 cell, you look to see if you have a grouping of 8. Well, we clearly don't have a group of 8 because we only got 3 ones. Then you look to see if you have a grouping of 4. Well, again, we only have 3 ones, so we can't group 4. Okay, now we look for groups of 2. So do you see a group of 2 ones that's a rectangle or a square? Wait, what cells? 0 and 4, right? See, that's a 2 grouping right there. Okay, so the way we usually show it is, with a little, it doesn't have to be dashes, but you could circle it like that. And now to get the term for that grouping, you look at the variables that are common to that grouping. So you see, this group of 2 here has the same column, right? See, they're both in the not B column, right? So we'll have not B. Also, that group of 2, they're both in the not C column. So the term that we get from that 2 grouping, which again is a 2 variable, is we get not B, not C. See, the reason why A is not part of this term is because A changes, right? This one is in the A column, this one is in the not A column. So the variable that changes, that's what drops out. The variables that are the same for that grouping, that's what remains. Okay, so does everybody see how I got not B, not C? Okay, so that takes care of that grouping. But we have another one over here, so we're going to have another term. Okay, every grouping gives you a term. And we can't group this with any other one. So this is just going to be a single grouping. And a single grouping gives you a 3 variable term. That 3 variable term is just going to be the term for a binary 3. So it's just going to be not A, B, C. Right? The same you get from a truth table for a binary 3. All right, so you see that's the reduced expression from the K-map. Right, so any questions on how I got that? Make sense? All right, let's go to the next problem. Let's go to this K-map. Okay, again, you're always thinking you want to get the least number of largest groupings. So you're always looking for the largest group. Again, we don't have a group of 8 here because we only got 4 ones. Okay, but this is the reason why I gave this particular problem, is to let you know that with K-maps, the edges touch. Right? It's almost like, you could fold the K-map where these 2 edges came together and you had like a cylinder, right? And then like you split it and flatten it out. Okay. So you see, instead of just doing two groupings, because these edges touch, I can do 1 4 grouping. That's it. Right, and the reason I would want to do one for grouping as opposed to two groupings is because one for grouping is going to give me one variable term. If I did two groups of two, that would give me two terms that have two variables. Right? Remember, the whole goal is to get the most reduced expression. Right? An expression with just one term, one variable is more reduced than two terms where each term has two variables. Okay, so you see this is going to be f equal to, now, what is common? Remember, a group of four, it's just going to give us one variable. What's the variable that's common to this four grouping? Not C. Not C, exactly. Right, see the four grouping has not C. That's common. Right, B is changing, right, because this grouping's under B, this group, well, these two ones are under B, and these two ones are under not B. And also A is changing, right? Because not A, well, not A, A. So those are the ones that drop out. All right, so everybody see how we got not C? All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, let's go to this one here. Okay, again, we're still grouping ones. Okay, so what would you do here? What's the first thing you do? What's the first grouping you would make? You see a group of 8? There's only 5 ones. You see a group of 4? Where's the group of 4? What cells? Yeah, right in the middle here, right? 1, 3, 5, 7. So that's a 4 grouping. Right? This is going to be for since we're grouping ones. So what term is this 4 grouping going to give us? What's the same for these 4? C. Okay. Now we have this other one, so it's going to be another term. Now here's, this is the reason why I have this example. Groups can overlap. Okay, so if we just did this one is a single grouping, that would give us a 3 variable term. But you see, we can overlap. See, we can do this. We can group this one in the 6 cell with this one in the 7 cell. We would want to do that to get a more reduced expression, right? Because a group of 2 is going to give us a 2 variable term, where a single grouping would give us a 3 variable term. Okay, so you can overlap groups. Okay, so what 2 variable term am I going to get from this 2 grouping here? A, B, right? Because that 2 grouping is in the A row and the B column. Okay, so this would be A, B. Okay, does that all make sense? I mean, the key thing again is you can overlap groups. All right, now we're going to group zeros. And the only thing that's different when you're grouping zeros is that now you'll get the reduced SOP for not F. Because remember, like with truth tables, when we wrote the expression where the zeros are, we would get an expression, an SOP for not F, but that would be the non-reduced. Right? So again, K-mapped, you're getting the reduced by the grouping of the zeros. So let's see. I see this sometimes. Tell me if this is correct. Can you group these 4 zeros like that? No, why not? The groupings have to be square or rectangular. They can't be irregular shaped. All right, so yeah, you can't do that because that's not a square or rectangle. Okay, so we don't have groupings of 4. So what do we have here? What would you group? What's that? We're doing this one. Yeah, we'll get to the dashes coming up, but yeah, we're doing this one here. Okay. So what would you group first? We're doing this one. Say that again. 6 and 4. We're grouping zeros. Yeah, we're grouping zeros. So grouping zeros, what would you do?
First zeros.
Okay, yeah, we can do these two, right? 0 and 1. Do that as a 2 grouping. So what two variables are common to this two grouping? Say it again?
Cannot be not.
Yep, may not be not, right? Because it's in the not A row in the not B column. So that would be not A, not B. Okay, okay. You're gonna have another term. What would you want to group next? Let's see, 1 and 5. Okay, we could do 1 and 5. Okay, so by doing 1 and 5, what term are we going to get? What's common to this two grouping here? Going to be a two variable, which two variables? Is it going to be A? No, it's not going to be A because A changes between these two, right? So what is the same for these two?
Not B and C.
Not B and C, right? Because not B, right? Not B is these two components, and then also C, right? So this will give us not B, C. Everybody see that? Okay, what would you do next? Which ones? You can do 5 and 7. Okay, so what would that give us? What's common to these two? AC, right? Because they're both in the A row, they're both in the C column. So this would be AC. Okay, and then we got this 0 here. So what would you do there? 0 here. Right. Again, these touch here, so you could just do 0, 0 with the 2. So what's common to these two? Not A, not C. Okay, so any question on that one? Okay, so good question.
Or it's the not used to, isn't that unnecessary?
Oh, did we make a mistake? Oh, actually, you're correct, right? Because this 1, 5 here, it's already taken care of, right? Because we already, let's see, we did the 0, 1, or did we? Did we do 0, 1? Yeah, we did 0, 1. So we did 0, 1, we did 5, 7. So yeah, this 1, 5 is not necessary. You're right. It's redundant because we already took care of the 0 in cell 1 and the 0 in cell 5. So let's see, what did that give us? That gave us not BC. So yeah, we wouldn't have this term. So does everybody see why we don't need that? Because Tyler, right?
Yeah.
Tyler. Yeah, Tyler caught this, that we actually had a redundant term because we already took care of this 0 in the 1 cell and the 0 in the 5 cell. So to do another grouping was just redundant. So that wasn't the most reduced. So see, your catch brings up a good point. That's the other thing you got to watch out for. You got to watch out for that you don't have any redundancy, because of course that's going to add terms that you don't need. But we just did this. Yeah, now, actually, this problem also brings up another point, is that sometimes you'll have a K-map that gives you more than one correct solution, like more than one most reduced equation, because, see, this would be one answer, but I could have the 1 and the 5, but then not have the 0 and 1. Like if I did group the 1 and 5, I could then just do the 0 and the 2 along with the 5 and the 7. So I would still get 3 terms that are 2 variables each. It would just be a different term. I would have the 1, 5 and not the 0, 1. Okay, so yeah, so there's more than one correct answer to this K-map. And I believe for the activity, there's one problem like that also, where there's more than one correct answer. Okay, so any questions on this one? Everybody saw the redundancy and why we got rid of it? Okay, so let's let's go to this one now. We're back to grouping ones, but as what was mentioned earlier, there's a symbol in this truth table that you haven't seen before. So what haven't you seen before in this came out? The dash, right? You haven't seen the dash. Well, what the dash stands for is the dash means don't care, doesn't matter, irrelevant. Okay, any of those things. See, you can have an output where you don't care what that output is equal to. Now, in any digital circuit or for any digital device, there's only two possible outputs. It's either 0, which is 0 volts, or 1, which is, you know, some plus amount of voltage. But you could have an output where you don't care whether it's a 0, right? It could be either, and you don't care. Like the most common example of a don't care output is an output that you don't connect. Okay, you'll see that there'll be a design later on in the quarter where you'll have the output of some digital device that we're not using. Okay, and that's very common, that you have a device that has multiple outputs and you don't use all the outputs. There's nothing that says you have to use all outputs of a device or a circuit. So if you're not using an output, it's a don't care, right? There's going to be a 0 or a 1 there, but you don't care because we're not using it. Now, in a K-map, don't cares are like wildcards. You make a don't care equal to whatever is going to help you get the most reduced expression. So you can make a don't care equal to a 1, or you can make a don't care equal to a 0. It's up to you. But you want to make it equal to whatever is going to give you the most reduced expression. All right, so let's look at this K-map. Now, again, we're grouping ones. So to get the most reduced expression, which again means you get the least number of largest groupings, what would you make these don't cares equal to? You're holding up one finger. Would you make both of them equal to 1? Because we have two don't cares. Are you saying make both equal to 1, or one of them? Separate values. Yeah, you can make one don't care 1 and the other is 0. You can make them both zeros. You can make them both 1s.
And only the one that has to be.
Yeah. You would only make this one a 1 and make this one a 0, right? Because if I make that a 1, now I can do a single grouping of 4, right? If I made that don't care a 0, I would have 2 groupings of 2, right? 2 groupings is going to give you 2 terms, and groupings of 2 are going to give you 2 variables, right? One grouping of 4 gives you one variable of one term of one variable. And then you'd want to make this a 0 because if I made that a 1, I would be adding a whole other term because I have another group. All right, so yeah, you want to make that don't care a 1, that don't care a 0. And then what is this 4 grouping going to give us for a term? Not B. If all those 4s are in the not B column. Okay, so everybody see how we did that? All right, let's go up to this one. Okay, this one also has some don't cares, and now we're grouping zeros. So since we're grouping zeros, this is going to give us not a. So what would you do here? What would you make the don't cares equal to?
Just 0, 1, 1, and the rest 0.
So you're saying do this? Make this a 1?
Yeah.
And then these zeros? Everybody agree with that, or does someone have a different idea? How many terms would this give us? Where one of those terms is coming from how we selected the don't cares, right? Just make them all 1s. Yeah. See, if we made the don't cares all 1s, then we just have 1, 2 grouping. So that would be the most reduced. But I'm glad you said what you did, because that's the reason why I put this up here, because a lot of times people feel as though they have to make the don't cares, at least some of them equal to what your grouping. But here's a case where, no, you want all your don't cares equal to what you're not grouping. Okay, so yeah, we would just have 1, 2 grouping here. So what term would we get from this grouping? Trying to give you a hint. Not A. Then what? Not A, C, right? Because they're both in the not A row and both in the C column. So this would be not A. Okay. Okay, so now those were 8 cell. Now we're doing 16 cell. It's the same idea with the 16 cell. The only difference is now when you have a 1 grouping, it's 4 variables, 2 grouping 3 variables, 4 groupings 2 variable, 8 grouping 1 variable, and then we take all 16, meaning 1 to 0, but the output is equal to 1 to 0. Okay. So here in this 16 cell, we're grouping 1s. So where would you start? And just like in that 8 cell, the 16 cell, the edges touch. So in a 16 cell, it's these edges and it's also the top and bottom edges that touch. Right? It's kind of like a sphere, like a globe, you know, and you cut it and make a flat map, same sort of thing. Okay, so knowing that the edges touch.
So for the 8 cell, we'll leave the up to the right next, but then for the 16 voters.
Well, you can do a 2 grouping vertically like we've been doing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's with an 8 cell, it doesn't really matter here, it only matters there. But yeah, with the 16 cell, these edges and these edges touch. Okay, so how would you group the ones here? Would you do 2 groupings of 2 like this? No, what would you do there? What would you do? A 4, yeah, because the edges touch, I can do 1 big group of 4, right? 6 and 14 with 1 and 4. See, this is a 4 group. So we'll get that, and then a 4 grouping in 16 cell gives us 2 variables. So what 2 variables are the same for these 4 here? Say again? Yeah, B, right? Because they're all in the B row, and then B not, right? Remember this is B not. That's it. Yeah, so this would be B, not B. Okay, but we still got some more 1s here. What would you do with this one? Would you do a single grouping? No, what would you do? Yeah, group it with the 4, right? Make a 2 grouping with the 4 because you can overlap. Right, so this 2 grouping in a 16 cell is going to give us a 3 variable term. So what 3 are the same here? B. Let's see. B, not A, not C. And then the other thing, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but when you write the terms for ease of grading and just by convention, put the terms in alphabetical order. Now, you know, if you wrote this as not B, not D, B, it's the same. You know, it's just like in base 10, right? Order doesn't matter. But again, just for ease of grading and also by convention, people do it this way. They put the terms in alphabetical order. All right, so this would be not A, B, and then not C, right? Can everybody see how we got that? Okay, and then how about this? What would we do here? Can we group this with anything? No, this would just be a single grouping, so it's going to give a 4 variable term. So it's just going to be not A, not B, C. Okay. So everybody see how we get this? All right, let's go up to this one. Again, we're grouping 1s. Okay, we're grouping 1s here. Okay, we're grouping one, so we'll get an expression for F. So what would you do first? Would you do this? Would you do a group of 8 like this? No, right, because that's in a regular shape. Again, it's gotta either be a square or a rectangle. So you can't do a group of 8.
Could you, or would you do the top 5 and 7 together?
Just 5 and 7?
Yeah.
Then we get a different idea?
5, 7, 8.
Yeah, see, remember, you wanna get the least number of largest groupings, and see, I can do a 4 grouping with that 5 and 7. Yeah, because that's gonna give me less variables, right? So yeah, we wanna do this. Okay, so that's gonna give us a 2 variable term. So what 2 variables are the same? B and D, so give us BD. Okay, so what would you do next?
Can we group a 4 with 9 and 11 and there's something?
Yep, exactly, yeah, because we can overlap. So we can do this 4 grouping. This one. Okay, and what are we gonna get for a term here? 80. Okay, and then we still have these ones that haven't been accounted for yet.
2 and 2. Is there actually?
So you're saying 12 and 14? Does anyone have another idea?
Just do all 4.
Yeah, just do all 4, because see, a grouping of 2 would give us a 3 variable term. But if we do a grouping of 4, well, actually, let's see, grouping of 2, yeah, 3 variables. But if we do a grouping of 4, we get a 2 variable. We want to go. Okay, so what is this gonna give us? What is it? AB, yeah. You guys have a question? Or are you working on this, or?
If you're just asking about the, like, how you would find the, like, the actual, like, groupings, like, kind of, they're permanent, just like in the case of random.
Okay, all right, yeah, I don't mind, it was a little distracting kind of thing, but, I mean, do you have a question about any of these that we went over?
You like, I mean, those ones kind of make sense, so like, what if you just like pick a random one, so like, how do you start from scratch?
Well, these are all just examples, and, you know, where these typically come from is a truth table. In fact, the lab 1, that's what you're gonna do, is that lab 1, and we'll look at it in detail coming up. But lab 1, you're given a word problem. You take the word problem, put it into a truth table, and then you put the truth table into the kernel map, and you use that to get the reduced expression. So these are all random. I just, you know, made up examples. Well, like I said earlier, it wasn't all haphazard, because I picked particular examples to show certain things. You know, like to show that the edges touch, to show you can overlap, to show, you know, don't cares and things like that. But where these K-maps come from is a truth table, which typically comes from some problem statement. So you'll see that when we get to the lab, right? The important thing, you know, by these examples is just seeing like the particular cases that we've gone over. Okay, so we just have a couple more here before you can start the activity into lab 1 here. So here's another 16 cell, and you can see it has a don't care, but one of the reasons I chose this example is to talk about how when you have a 16 cell, the corners touch. So you see here we're grouping 1s, and since each corner has a 1, I can make a 4 grouping, like the corners make a 4 grouping. Okay, so we would have, you know, F equal to, and then what 2 variables are common to the corners? What is it? Yeah, B naught, E naught, right? Because See, the corners are all in not B rows. And, wait a minute. Did I not take care? Let's see, not B, oh, I wrote it in the wrong place, so this is not C up here. And then not E then. Sorry. Yeah, so you see the corners, they're in the not E rows and the not E columns. Okay, so the corners are gonna give you not E, not E. Okay, now, we still have these ones here that we haven't accounted for yet, and we have this don't care. So what would you do here? Yeah, make the don't care one, and then you can do another four grouping. And we did a four grouping in the middle right here. That's what gave us the BD. Okay, so you see, most reduced expression here would be not B, not D, or BD. Now, next week, we're gonna talk about two other gates that we haven't talked about yet, an exclusive OR and exclusive NOR. And when we talk about those gates, you'll see that this expression can actually be reduced one more step, not using a Carnot map, but using an identity that's on that handout. But as far as right now, what we've covered in class, this would be as far as you can go. Okay, but next week you'll see that in a case like this, you can actually go one more step. Okay, but we'll talk about that next week. All right, one more to go here. So here we're grouping zeros, and we have a couple of don't cares. So what would you do here? And this is going to give us not F. Any ideas? Okay. Yeah, you make these ones, you can make this a four grouping. And what would you do with the zero here? What's that? What, yeah, you group it with the 8, right? Okay, good. Yeah, everybody see that? Yeah, we want to make these don't cares one, because we make them 0, we're just gonna add terms. Here's a four grouping, and then just take this 0 and overlap it here. Okay, so what is this four grouping gonna give us for a term? What's common? What's two variables? My finger's getting tired. What two variables? Not C, not D. Huh? Okay, and then for this two grouping, we're gonna get a three variable term. What is it gonna be? A, not B. Let's see, is it gonna be C? Not D. See why it's not C, because C changes, right? Not C over here, C over here. So C drops out, but not D is the same. It's the not D. Okay, now, one more thing. Remember last week when we were writing the expressions from a truth table? And when we looked at the ones, we got the SOP for F. When we looked at the zeros, we got SOP for not F. Again, the only difference between expression from the truth table and expression from Carnot map is from the truth table that's non-reduced, from a K-map that's reduced. But when we were doing the truth tables last week, if we wanted POS for F, right? So, last week, I forgot to turn the camera on. I always forget to turn the camera on. I'm gonna have to start assigning people to tell me when to turn the camera on, because even when I put it up there in red, I can't see it. Okay. But yeah, last week, right, we talked about if you want EOS for F, you start with What? SOP for what? For what? Not. Yeah, remember, right? Because once you have that SOP for not F, if you then do De Morgan's twice, right? Everything inverts, ands go to ors go to ands. So if you want POS for F, you got to start with SOP for not F. Well, same thing with the Carnot map. If you want to get the reduced POS for F, you got to start with the reduced SOP for not F. So you see, a lot of the times, the reason you want to circle the zeros to get a reduced SOP for not F is so that then you can go to a reduced POS for F. Right? We would do it the same way as we did last time, where everything inverts, ands go to ors, and ors go to ands, right? So we have C or E anded with not A or with B or with. Just make sure. It's always good to double check when you do this so you don't miss like an inversion or anything. Right? So I didn't miss anything, right? I changed that and to an or, used ands to an or, I inverted. Using that or to an and. So you see, this is the reduced POS for F. It comes from the reduced SOP for not F. Right? Right? This is the same thing we did last week. Okay, so is everyone good up to this point? Any questions up to this point? We just got a few more things to do here. Okay, I'm gonna show you the activity on Canvas, so I got to pull the screen down in just a moment. Also on Canvas, I'll show you lab 1. But before I pull down the screen and do those things, I just want to make some comments just because I got some emails lately of things we talked about, but evidently people missed some of this. So again, I just want to stress for the lab work that each student does their own design, right? So you're all working on your same thing. You're not looking over somebody's shoulder. You're not like sitting next to each other, typing in the same thing, right? You're either sitting across from each other or sitting in different parts of the room while you're doing the lab work, but you're also collaborating, right? That if you run into a problem, you can go to your partner and say, hey, you know, what are you getting? I'm getting this. And that's how you work together and learn from each other. If you're both doing the same thing, then you're not going to learn from each other. Right? You're making the same mistakes because you're just copying each other. That's not going to help in the long run. So by being separate and collaborating, you can help each other with debugging. Also, even though each person's doing their own thing, only one submission per group, right? So there's 2 people in the group, but you just submit, one thing, one lab work. And again, we talked about what to submit. It's a single PDF, a link to the demo video, and then, 3 screenshots that we talked about. Okay, and even though this is not a requirement, I didn't make it a requirement, but I would strongly recommend that when you make the video, have both people there. Okay, and the reason for that is if both people are there, it's less likely you're going to make an error and less likely you're going to omit something, right? Because again, you only have one shot to turn this in, so you got to make sure it's good the first time. So what has happened in the past is, someone makes a video and it's a truth table with 8 inputs and they only do 7. And if you don't show the entire truth table, if you don't show that your design can do the entire truth table, then it's not working 100%. Right? 100% means it's working for that entire truth table and you have to show it in the video. Right? Just because you show 7 out of 8 doesn't mean the 8th one is working. There's lots of times when only one row in a truth table is not working. Okay? All right, but again, I didn't make it a requirement that both people have to be in the video, but I would strongly urge that you do that, even though it's not a requirement. All right, so anyway, I'm just rehashing what I said before because I got emails about this, so I just wanted to go over it again. All right, but let's look at Canvas, the activity and also the lab for this week. Oops, sorry, let me bump into your chair. Let's see, turn this on. So just take a minute for this to heat up. Okay, so here's the activity. You can see there's 8 K-maps. So for all 8, oh, actually, I forgot to talk about this notation. I'm sorry. I have to turn this off again real quick. Sorry about that. I forgot to talk about the compact notation here. Let's shut this off real quick. Oops, there we go. Oh, yeah, before we look at the activity, there's these other 2 forms. One's called compact minimum, the other one's called compact maximum. And what these 2 forms tell us is that, first of all, with compact minimum, and it's identified by the summation sign, these numbers inside the parentheses, these are the indexes for f equal to 1. Okay, so this is shorthand for a truth table. Instead of writing out a whole truth table, you just look at this compact min form, and in your K-map, if you go, well, here, I'll write it. So say we have an 8-cell K-map, 0, 1, 3, 2, 4, 5, 7, 6. Okay, well, this compact min form, it's telling us where the 1s are. So there would be a 1 in cell 1, there would be a 1 in cell 3, there'd be a 1 in cell 4, there'd be a 1 in cell 6, and then all the others would be 0. Okay, and then the compact maximum form, which is identified by this Greek symbol, the numbers inside the parentheses are the indexes for f equal to 0. All right, so you would just put in zeros for the cells of these numbers, and all the other cells would be 1. Okay, so that's what this is all about. It's just a shorthand notation for a truth table. And the only reason I really cover this is because it's on that activity. So going back to the activity. Because I shut it off. Oh, okay, there it goes. I was worried it would be more time, but okay, it's coming up now. So there's 8 K-maps, and you're given what cells are 0 and what cells are 1 by this compact notation that we just talked about. And for all 8 K-maps, I want you to find the reduced SOP for F. So to get the reduced SOP for F, you got to circle what? SOP for F, you circle 1s, right? Okay, so for all 8, I want you to circle, group the 1s and get the reduced SOP for F. Now, for these 4 only, okay, the 4 that are on the right side, in addition to getting the reduced SOP for F, I want you to get the reduced POS for F. So to get the reduced POS for F, you got to start with the reduced for what did we just do just prior to me putting the screen down that we also did last week? Like if we wanted a POS equation for F, we had to start with an SOP for not F, exactly. So for the reduced POS for F, you want to start with the reduced SOP for not F. So what are you going to circle then? Circle what? The zeros. Okay, so for all 8, you're gonna be circling 1s, right, to get the reduced SOP graph. And then just for these 4 on the right, you wanna circle 0s to get the reduced SOP for not F, because then you can do the Morgans twice to get the reduced POS for F. I know that's a lot of acronyms and a lot of, F's and not F's, but you just gotta get used to it. Okay. All right, so that's the activity. So again, just like the other activities, you work at your table, everybody works on their own, and then you just pass in 1 for your table. And then once you're done with the activity, you can start on lab 0. Okay, you won't be able to finish it today because there's some information that you need for part 2 that I'll talk about on Thursday. But you can do a big part of lab 1 before Thursday. Okay, and this is what lab 1 is. See, we give you a word problem. Okay, you have a locked box that has 4 inputs. And for these inputs that are listed, I believe there's 9 of them, the box will open. And when the box opens, that equates to an output of 1. Okay, so you have 4 inputs. So if you have 4 inputs where each input can either be a 0, 1, how many unique combinations do you have of inputs? 16, right? 2 to the 4, 16. So you're going to have a truth table with 16 rows. In 9 of those 16 rows, it's going to have an output equal to 1. The other outputs, going to be 0. So that's where you start. You make the truth table for this word problem. And then from the truth table, we want you to get the SOP and POS equations. So those are going to be the non-reduced equations, right? Because you're getting them right from the truth table. Okay, we want you to draw a black box diagram. So in my earlier sections today, it seems like a lot of people missed this last week when we talked about a black box diagram because we didn't spend a lot of time on it. But what is like the main purpose of a black box diagram? Like, why bother drawing it? Like, what use does it have? Because what does a black box diagram show?
It just tells you what you should get out when you put stuff in.
Yeah, exactly. A black box diagram just shows you the inputs and outputs, your main inputs and outputs. Right, so remember last week, we had the breakfast example, and there was 3 inputs, and there was 1 output. And then lab 0 also had, 3 inputs and 1 output. Here, you got 4 inputs. Also, we want you to come up with the reduced SOP and reduced POS equations. So this is where you got to use a K-map. Right, so you're going to have the non-reduced from the table, truth table. You're going to have the reduced expressions from the K-map. And then it's the reduced expressions that we want you to put in Vivado. So, last week, lab 0, you had just 1 equation, right? So in your design source, you just had 1 assigned statement. Here for part 1, you're going to have 2 equations. So you're going to have 2 assigned statements. You'll have an assigned statement for the POS equation, and you'll have an assigned statement for the SOP equation. Okay? And if by Thursday's class, you're able to successfully simulate both your SOP and POS, the only thing you'll have to do on Thursday after I talk about it is add a 3rd equation, because on Thursday, we're going to talk about 2 other forms. Okay, we talked about SOP and POS. There's 2 other forms called NAN, and NOR. Okay, and we'll talk about that on Thursday. And after I talk about that, you'll be able to do part 2, because part 2 is just adding a 3rd output, a NOR output. Okay, so before Thursday, you're not downloading anything to the board. Okay, before Thursday, it would be nice, although you have till Monday to complete this. So if you're not at this point on Thursday, it's no big deal. But on Thursday, if you're able to do a successful simulation of both your POS reduced and your SOP reduced, on Thursday, you'll just have to add 1 more equation and you'll be done. So, if you have your simulation for both SOP and POS by Thursday, you'll probably finish this lab on Thursday. Okay? All right, so And this is all on Canvas. You know where to find these lab instructions on Canvas, right? If you go to modules and you look under where the meetings are, you'll see all the labs and the lab instructions. And so any questions before you get started on your work, because again, start with the activity. Once your table is done with the activity and you're passing a hard copy, so you get credit. For the lab portion, like I said previously, if you don't want to stay in the room, if you'd rather work on the lab at home or, go to a library, whatever you want to do, that's fine. Again, the advantage of staying here though, is if you run into problems, I'm here, Blake will be here at 5. Okay, but you should be ready now to do the activity and also work in the lab. You have a question?
You said to the right hand activity, it would just right hand, or just have, use POS, or do you want this?
Yeah, SOP and POS. So there's a total of 12 problems, because you're gonna do all 8 for reduced SOP, and then just the 4 right for reduced POS. So there's a total of 12.
Is it okay if I write this table, because someone else is saying that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you don't have to stay at the same table. If you want to be at different tables, that's fine. But yeah. Yeah, just make sure again that your name is on what's turned in so you get credit. And my answers for the activity are up here. They're on this sheet right here. So compare when you get to mine.